Hey there, hello, welcome back. Thank you. Thank you always for coming back and watching these stories. It means a lot, so thank you for that. So this is episode number 10 in the series I'm doing, showing how God is good. Just say that, God is good. God has done amazing things in my life. He has overruled many, many bad choices, and He has helped me wade through the murky, muddy waters of my mental health problems. So we're going to get right going here on this. As I was putting this story together, it just kind of dawned on me that a lot of these stories are just incredibly dark and depressing. I am sorry about that, but see, much of my life during that time were those things. But the thing is, my time in Denver, though eventually becoming unbelievably destructive, they were also some of the best years of my life, bar none. I met some of the most incredible people I've ever known during that time I was there. Some of my memories are so rich and so pleasant that they invade my nightly dreams on a regular basis. I'll have dreams about Denver all the time. Some of those positive experiences, they directly affected and shaped the person I am today. In fact, some of the long-standing mental problems, deficiencies I had growing up, they were essentially cured during that time. I just don't struggle with a lot of those things anymore. They were so influential, those 3 years, and so all-encompassing that I've always kind of used Denver as like this demarcation line in my life. Those who know me the best know me well. They understand what I'm saying when I refer to my life in pre-Denver and post-Denver terms. In fact, I'm actually afraid to go back and visit Denver because I don't want any of those memories to be sullied. It's kind of like, watching a kid or watching a movie that you loved as a kid as an adult and it not holding up. It's just almost have been better if you just cherish those memories and made watching those movies you loved as a kid off limits, because nothing good comes from that. Usually it's pretty much ruined. So in my last story, I left off with finally escaping the ghetto, moving in with those 4 guys from church, and starting a new job at Hollywood Video. I also made the statement that my time at Hollywood Video so thoroughly altered the course of my time in Denver. I promise you, that statement is not unwarranted hyperbole. Not so much of the job itself, though there's plenty of stories to come out of that time there, but more just the people that I met along the way. Some were extremely influential, both positively and negatively. Unfortunately, mostly negatively. And the most negative of those were 2 specific guys that I'm going to start telling you about right now. I don't mean to belabor the point. It's shocking to me that time of, rewinding VHS tapes that were returned, unwound, and going through the store endlessly and resituating those empty boxes, and because they're all askew on the shelves. Those are you people who grew up in the glory days of, movie rental stores. You know what I'm talking about, all those all over the place. That was a lot of my time. But the thing is, that time then is quite possibly probably the most significant moment in my time at Denver, and definitely one of the most significant and meaningful times in my entire life. So much happened because of me getting a job at Hollywood Video. And it's also kind of amusing to me because I also kind of came up with this as I was putting together this story, that I never did make it to the real Hollywood, though I will come super close 7 years from this time frame I'm telling you now. And my wife has always kind of encouraged me with the reality that I didn't make it because God didn't want me there, because He knew I just couldn't handle all the soul-stealing temptations that come with Hollywood. But the irony is that Hollywood Video, the video store, actually introduced me to a lot of those temptations and scenarios that I would have come across in Hollywood anyway. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that popped in my head. But enough rambling. Let's go. Come on already. Get on with the story. So the store manager who hired me, he needed to hire a new store manager because he was getting promoted to district manager. At this point, I was already trained and been there for a couple of weeks. So by the time my new store manager showed up, I was ready to go. This store manager guy, he is guy number one, okay? I've always made a point to never use real names. I don't have their permission, so I'm just going to call him Jake. Jake and I, we bonded pretty quick. Even though he was a couple of years older than me, the bonding was pretty strong because, see, his father he was a former Baptist pastor. And sadly, like most preacher kids, Jake he abandoned God and church altogether. He wanted nothing to do with it. I, however, still trying to play the Christian church game, but it was obvious my heart was waning. Though at this point I wasn't a drunk, never really was, but I was definitely drinking way more at this point since I started hanging out with Jake. Still no drugs though, not yet. I started hanging out with him a lot outside of work. We were constantly going to a restaurant bar and hanging out. And, I was trying to, like I said, still playing that game, hanging out on that fence. I was trying to invite Jake to come to church with me, at the very least come hang out with my singles friends. But he's like, nah, I'm good. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. And his influence was definitely taking hold of me. Because part of the problem with Jake is that he was just a ridiculously smart guy. He was one of the smartest people I've ever known. And I was just so enamored with his intelligence. And at that point where I was in my mind, I was starting to kind of see where he was coming from with his whole perspective of God. It was making sense to my already rebellious and disobedient heart. Because of that, I want to give you 3 quick Bible verses to just kind of emphasize what was happening to me. The first one is Galatians 6:7. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that he will also reap. Second verse, 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. See how these first 2 verses start with do not be deceived? Don't trick yourself into thinking that the second part of these verses is inaccurate. The final verse is Proverbs 12:26. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. That was Jake, absolutely leading me astray. Now, I back up. I don't want this to come across as that I'm putting one shred of blame on Jake at all. Every bad decision I ever made, 100% my fault. I take full responsibility for it. I'm just trying to show that Satan knew exactly what he was doing with me at that time in my life, and that I was completely ripe for destruction. But more than that, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. I say that verse because God knew what he was doing by allowing Satan to lead me down this path of destruction. God needed me to drink my fill, okay? I was at that point in my life where there was no turning back. As Paul said in Romans, God absolutely gave me up to the lust that was in my heart. So, about a month after Jake took over that Hollywood video, he hired a new assistant manager, which is guy number 2. I'm calling him Mark, and he was also a couple of years older than me. The 3 of us became friends pretty quick. We were hanging out after work all the time, and it was always usually at a bar, a restaurant bar, typically. I could care less about drinking. I hated it. It was unpleasant, just gross. But I wanted to hang out with him. So, unlike Jake, Mark had zero background with God other than extreme hate. Hated God because when Mark was a teen, his dad killed himself. If I remember correctly, he hung himself in the basement. Super sad situation. Unsurprisingly, it completely shattered his world, and it had a direct impact on his mental health and definitely his emotional maturity. It set him way back. But the thing is, when he turned 18, he inherited $200,000 from his dad, and he thoroughly wasted all that money with flair and gusto, let me tell you, but I'm going to tell you in a different story later on. So, because everything was going on with Mark, I had a much different bond with him than I had with Jake. Mark was very much broken like me. Jake was very intelligent, and he knew it. He absolutely knew it. He also knew he had no time for mental weakness. some of the fondest and the best memories I have of my time in Denver, they were spent hanging out with Mark. We had some great conversations. We were emotionally vulnerable with each other and trying to be supportive and just trying to be good friends with each other. He was such a great guy. He got me and I got him. He had this just massive caring heart that was just too big for his fractured mind. One of his favorite things to do was, during some of Denver's more ridiculously horrific blizzards, is he'd drive around looking for people who were in a ditch, driven off the road, and he'd come to their rescue. He had this old Nissan Pathfinder. It was a total beast. It was a warrior in the snow. It just, man, nothing could stop it. Sorry. He always had a tow strap with him in his Pathfinder, and he'd use it to pull people out. He never accepted any money from them. He just was happy he could help them. He just was happy he could rescue them. I'm sure that he was helping people because he was unable to help his dad deal with some of those mental struggles he went through. So Mark was an amazing guy, but he was also a ticking time bomb. And sadly, I had a front row seat to his inevitable self-destruction. It was like being at a Gallagher concert. I got a lot of it on me, and I didn't have a raincoat. I didn't have a poncho. It landed in my lap. But way later, get to that in a minute, in several minutes, different story. So one day, Mark and I were working, and at the end of it, his really good female friend who went through with him the death of his dad when they were kids, she picked him up from the video store. They were going to hang out, but they weren't going to go out drinking. They had something completely different in mind. Okay, they asked me if I wanted to come with them. I liked his little female friend. We got along great. She was just so super chill and laid back. She was a total 90s hippie. She was great. She was so fun to be around. I'll never forget it. I'm in the back seat. Mark's in the passenger seat, and his friend's in the driver's seat. And we're all just kind of talking, hanging out. It's a beautiful night, smoking cigarettes. And they just kept acting all sketchy and suspicious and talking really low to each other. And Mark was constantly kind of leaned over doing something. I couldn't see what he was doing out in the back seat. So I'm starting to feel like a kid in the back seat. I was getting really annoyed with him. I'm like, would you stop whispering? What are you talking about? Let me in on what it is you're talking about. So it kind of gave silent nods to each other. And apparently that was an okay, let's do this thing. So Mark turns around and hands me a pipe, a bowl filled with pot. That's what he was doing in the front. He was loading up this thing. Now, he asked me if I wanted some, but as I told you, I only did it one time, and that was almost 7 months ago. And I also said I would never do it again. But at this point, I was so completely lost in my rebellion. I'm like, I don't care anymore. Absolutely. Why not? Let's do it. I also didn't want to look like a wuss in front of them either. So I took that pipe, fired it up. Oh, man. Totally different. Let's just say that. It was a different situation than when I did it that one time with my friend. That moment of the second time doing that, it completely heralded a new chapter of my life. It opened up a door to me that, oh my goodness. Anyway, I'll keep going here. So I was not paranoid. I was not freaked out. Instead, I was utterly and hopelessly in love with it. I'm not trying to build this up. Please forgive me. I'm not glorifying this, and I will work really hard in these upcoming stories to not over-sensationalize drugs. I'm just telling you where I was at that moment. That's where my brain was, okay? It was one of the most incredible moments of my life up to that point. Everything in my mind, it neatly arranged themselves into this cohesive and non-threatening flow of thoughts and feelings. It sounds overly poetic, and in a way it's not poetic enough, because everything in my mind for the first time ever, it just mellowed out. Everything just calmed down. I was completely comfortable in my skin. I felt at home. I was like, oh my goodness, where have you been my whole life? Well, that's it for this story. I'm going to just keep on going with the next story. There's a whole lot more to tell. I want to end this one with making abundantly clear. I've said many times that God has overruled my terrible choices and decisions. That's not to say that I don't suffer the consequences from those bad choices. He didn't overrule those things. He overruled some of the circumstances, some of the fallout that could have come with my bad choices. Trust me, I am still to this day carrying some baggage from 30 plus years, almost 30 years of bad choices I've made in my life. They don't affect me as much now. A lot of it's been kind of evened out because I started making better choices. But it's just, in this day and age, I fear that it is a trend now to take away consequences from people's bad choices. We learn best from failure. We learn best from bad outcomes to decisions that we made. You touch a hot stove, oh, it burns, it hurts. You don't do it again. But unfortunately, it's the new loving thing to try to protect people from the consequences of their bad choices. I'm telling you right now, these poor people, they are being shortchanged. They are being shackled. They are having a very bad disservice being done to them because they're not learning from that mistake. So they constantly keep redoing it over and over and over again. And all the while, they're leaving a wake of destruction to the people they love behind them, to people closest in their lives, because no one is coming alongside and saying, hey, stop touching the hot stove. Stop making these stupid decisions. Shame is a good thing. I hate to tell you, shame is powerful. It teaches us. That is the way God made things. We learn from our mistakes. So love those people in your life. Love the people that are making bad choices, but allow the pain and the discomfort of those bad choices to have their refining and their healing effect on their lives. Come alongside them, be there with them when they come out of it, but stop taking them out of the moment. And for those of you who are making these bad choices, learn from it. Cry out to God. I keep hammering this home. Cry out to Jesus. He will come alongside you if you cry out and ask for him. He has said that for all those who call out to him, he will in no wise cast out. He will not say, talk to the hand. Jesus will never say, talk to the hand for those of us who are still alive. He will say, talk to the hand after we're dead if we haven't accepted him into accepted what he has told us to accept. But that's something to touch on later. All right, I'm done. I'm done preaching. Thank you so much for listening. Come back, see what happens, see what comes through that new door that was opened up by that pot. See what happens in my life. As always, keep pressing on, my friends. Thanks.